Welcome to episode 92 of the Talking Friars podcast. Ben Fadden, your host here. Today, to start off the week, we'll be talking about Franmil Reyes and his fit on the Padres, and kind of looking a little bit back on his being traded to the Indians, now the Guardians in 2019, and how that trade obviously worked out. Worked out or not, didn't work out for the Padres. And this all was kind of, started by some things that happened on his Twitter and his likes that he had on his profile. Franmil obviously was a fan favorite for the Padres, but over the weekend, we'll just get right to it here. Thanks for joining. Franmil has his Twitter activity's been interesting. He posted an Instagram post about just it says "hungry for more" in the caption was one of his posts, and so just does he want to be here? And it seems like he does. On the Talking Friars Twitter here, for the audio people, you can look that up. We're showing it right here for the YouTube version on YouTube. Franmil Reyes has liked an article about the Padres needing to trade Eric Hosmer by the East Village Times. Now, I don't want to take shots at the East Village Times, but it's kind of like, no, duh. Yeah, of course he needs, he needs to be traded. Like, Hosmer obviously has like a 0 WAR. He just doesn't contribute much to the roster on the field. His defense has got worse. It's like he hits ground balls almost every time, it seems like, to second base or strikes out. His clutch, he hasn't been as clutch, since 2020, it seems like. So he right now, obviously the contract's a big barrier, but this article that Franmil liked, it was kind of like, no, duh, of course Hosmer should be traded. Like, I don't get why write that, but I guess you got to find something to write about. But moving on to just Franmil liking this article, it's kind of weird. It's kind of like Franmil's being a Padres fan. So that kind of just spurs the conversation of, does Franmil want to be a Padre? And it seems like he does, right? The Padres are going to be in a better situation going into next year than the Guardians are in Cleveland. Cleveland obviously traded Francisco Lindor, who is, the face of their franchise. They've traded Kluber, they've traded Trevor Bauer, they traded Clevenger to us. They've traded pretty much everyone except Jose Ramirez. And so they don't look like they're going to be a playoff team. But I think that it's interesting that Franmil liked this. He's pretty much being a Padre fan, liking the tweet. Every fan wants Hosmer to be traded. And I think that him liking it, obviously he agrees, it seems like. And if Hosmer is traded, that could open a DH spot, a first base spot, a corner outfield spot. Just if Hosmer's traded, you don't know how Preller's going to fill out the roster, and that could open a move for a power hitting outfield bat in a trade. I'm not saying that Franmil Reyes is coming. I don't think he will, but I just think it's really interesting, and I've seen it on Twitter and all the reaction. Everyone's saying, "Come home, Franmil," and because he was a fan favorite, and just this whole episode is kind of like just looking back on the trade, and obviously just saying that Franmil fits on this team, and it's unfortunate that he's not on the roster because a lot of problems for the Padres would be solved. But Franmil, no doubt, fits on the Padres. It's just unfortunate that he's just not on the team. And so let's kind of just get right into looking back on the trade and what he would do for this team right now if he was still on the team. There's obviously not a whole lot to talk about during the lockout. And when a former Padre likes a post about the Padres needing to trade Eric Hosmer, his former teammate, it's noteworthy, but I don't know what to take from it, but it's still noteworthy and something to talk about. Back in 2019, I liked the trade at the time. I think I need to mention that because I know you're going to hear a lot of people talking about how this is one of the dumbest trades Preller has done in his Padres tenure as general manager. And It's not helping the team right now. And while that's, pretty obvious, I do want to make sure and state it, for me at least, that I liked the trade at the time. I was okay with moving on from Franmil because of what they were getting back, assuming that this player, which I'll get into, was going to be a Padre for years and years to come and be in the starting outfield for years and years to come. And obviously, this was before Trent Grisham was in a Padre uniform, traded to the Padres before the 2020 season. So I was thinking Trammell might be the center fielder of the future. Taylor Trammell, obviously the guy that the Padres traded for, the prospect in the Reds organization. Remember, it was a three-way trade with Franmil going to Cleveland, Yasiel Puig, I believe, Bauer going to Cincinnati. So there was a lot of moving parts in the deal, but Franmil was dealt to Cleveland. Padres got back Taylor Trammell, and this trade obviously doesn't look good. But again, I did want to state that I liked the trade at the time. Before getting into it in hindsight, I liked it because of the player that the Padres were getting back. We didn't know that the universal DH was coming in 2020 during a COVID season. We didn't know what COVID was. We didn't know that a universal DH was going to come probably like it will be in 2022. And Franmil's not good at defense, so it was like, hey, trade him to an American League team. He can DH there, good for him. And we can get back a star outfield prospect, because that's what Trammell was. He was hitting home runs in the Futures game, which is, for those that don't know, during All-Star Week, the top prospects in baseball play against one another, and Trammell was hitting home runs in Washington. I think he took home the MVP of the Futures game that year in 2019. That was right before he got dealt. So, yeah, I was excited about getting Trammell. I think I wrote an article for a site I used to write for about it, and I liked it. Again, because I didn't think Franmil fit the team, wasn't great at defense, and we were getting back Taylor Trammell, who I thought was going to be the center fielder of the future, play here at least 5-6 years on that major league contract, be a top of the order bat. But the Padres gave up on him and then just flipped him to the Mariners in that Austin Nola coming to the Padres deal, where the Padres sent Ty France and Trammell and Munoz. Who else did they send? But anyway, they got back Nola, they got back Austin Adams, Dan Altavilla. So that deal just has not worked out for the Padres. And it's really unfortunate that if I were Preller, even in that point, I wouldn't have given up on Trammell, and I definitely would not have traded Ty France. Now, I know that Nola was getting, I'm pretty sure I liked that deal from what we were getting in Nola, but obviously in hindsight, that deal's terrible. I didn't like giving up on Ty France, and then obviously Ken Rosenthal reporting, I think last year, that in 2020, Preller told Ty France, like 2 weeks before the deadline, that we want you here and we're going to build here with you and you're going to be a part of our future. That obviously didn't happen. That was a lie. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate that that the Padres gave up on Trammell, that he didn't play even one full minor league season with the Padres. That's what makes this frustrating for me. I like Trammell. Again, I'll keep saying it. I loved Trammell at the time, and he could still turn into something. He's probably going to be a fourth outfielder for the Mariners, fourth or fifth outfielder, I think, when he consistently gets big league time and consistently, finally gets up to Seattle for good. Because they do have a really talented outfield, young outfielders led by Julio Rodriguez, I think is his name. Mitch Haniger's in there. So they have a talented outfield. But yeah, Trammell, I didn't want to give up on him. I wouldn't have given up on him. I know he struggled in Double-A, I think, with the Sod Poodles at the end of that 2019 season. Again, 2020, though, that they didn't have a minor league season. They were playing at the alternate site at USD. I wouldn't have given up on him. You traded for a top prospect in Major League Baseball, not just the Reds organization. I think he was the Reds' top prospect, but at least outfield, obviously. You don't give up on a top prospect like that to get back a catcher who isn't known for power and some relievers. Like, I wouldn't do that. Especially when Trammell was going to come cheap because he would still be on the rookie deal. So this has kind of moved into a Trammell thing for me. But in terms of Reyes, especially if you're just going to flip him to the Mariners like you did. So they essentially traded Franmil for Dan Altavilla, who's had knee problems, for Austin Adams, who set a record for hit batters last year. Who else was there? Nola, obviously, who's had knee issues, injuries, has really done nothing. I mean, just having Caratini as the catcher and even bringing up Campusano or just signing Jason Castro again or something on a 1-year deal would have been better in hindsight from what Nola produced last year. So they essentially, again, Nola was the big guy in that. So let's just say that they essentially traded for Nola and gave Trammell to the Mariners. You know, they traded Reyes for Nola. Like, that's essentially what they did because Trammell got flipped. And so obviously right now that's really bad. If I could redo this trade based on obviously everything that I'm talking about, obviously I'd redo that if I were AJ. But obviously you can't do anything about it now. Trammell, I mean, Trammell would have been an option. I keep going back to Trammell, I know, but Trammell I really liked, and Trammell would have been an option at least off the bench this year in the outfield. And now they need, the Padres wouldn't have had to trade Espinoza at the trade deadline for Marisnick. They would have had Trammell maybe on the bench there as an option. There's just other things that happen because of this deal. Trammell would be a bench outfield option going into spring training. Obviously, if that Cincinnati trade or that Cleveland Cincinnati Padres three-way trade didn't happen in 2019, Reyes would be a 30 home run guy option, and that would solve a lot of problems for the Padres. I want to share my screen here for the YouTube audience, but the audio audience, I'll explain. A big reason why this would be a success for the Padres. One, like I mentioned, 30 home run track record. 2019, he hit 37 home runs combined with Cleveland and San Diego. Franmil did. 2021 with Cleveland, he hit 30 home runs, drove in 85. He drove in more runs in 2021 than he did in 2019 when he hit 7 more home runs than he did in 2021. So you're getting a 30 home run guy, and guess what? He'd be on the roster, and the Padres wouldn't have to go fishing for a Chris Bryant or a Nick Castellanos. Would they do it? Maybe, but they might. If Franmil was on the roster and they had those 30 home runs, maybe they'd be more inclined to bet on a Will Myers, Trent Grisham, and Tommy Pham outfield again, bounce back years a little bit, and just bring in a bench 1-year Jock Peterson type bench outfielder who can platoon. That might still happen, but they're now big name hunting for a Castellanos or a Bryant to fill a role that, in terms of power numbers, that Franmil would have done. And a big reason why, this is going to cost Peter Seidler, the owner, Ron Fowler, just the ownership, Preller in terms of, payroll room and stuff, is Franmil's salary. 2022, he's getting paid $3.5 million. That's like nothing compared to what the Padres will have to pay Chris Bryant or Nick Castellanos, $20-25 million, maybe $30 million a year, at least front loaded. That's a big gap. That's a $20+ million gap that you could have just paid Franmil if that 2019 trade obviously didn't happen, to be your DH or be an outfielder, and bring a Marisnick back or something for defense. There's just so many different scenarios where you'd be saving a whole lot of money. Franmil isn't a free agent until 2025, and so he'd be on the Padres with power numbers, not getting $30 million a year for the Padres' prime World Series contending run, at least on paper. And so many problems would be solved if the Padres, and as I'm saying this right now, if the Padres kept Franmil and didn't make this 2019 move. I'm showing Franmil in 2019 hitting this home run to beat the Braves 4-3. Franmil went 3 for 4 that day. Paddock earned the win. I mean, so if Paddock can bounce back, that would be huge, but that's another topic. But that's really the topic of this episode, the meaning of this episode. A lot of problems would probably be solved if Franmil was on the team and that deal then wasn't made. I don't have any ill things towards Austin Nola or anything like that, but he just hasn't really worked out. 2020 he was fine, but he's more of a hit for average guy, not a whole lot of power. I like Nola at the time of that deal, just like I like Trammell at the time of that deal. But obviously, in hindsight, you'd rather have Franmil, especially if Trammell was just going to get flipped. The Padres, I don't like them. I didn't like them just giving up on him, not even having him play a full minor league season. And then obviously getting Nola back. I mean, what has that given you? Obviously, they didn't get out of the NLDS in 2020. Then he had an injury, filled year in 2021, and now Preller brings in Jorge Alfaro, and you don't know if he's going to start at catcher, if Caratini's going to steal some more of Nola's time. So Nola might just end up getting traded for a prospect who we don't know about in a deal, that a team's willing to bet on him. So just all of the chain reactions that happened from that 2019 trade, it just has set the franchise. No, I don't want to say set the franchise back, but you would have liked to add Franmil for 2020 when he could have DH'd and hit some home runs. Obviously you want Franmil. You'd rather have Franmil as a DH probably next year than Hosmer if that has to happen, if they don't get Nelson Cruz. Obviously, assuming a universal DH is implemented, or you're going to have to give Cruz 1 year, $7-8 million, as opposed to the $3.5 million. You save, $5 million there. Well, there you go. I mean, just little differences, little things here that could help the team. Obviously, the big thing is if they had Franmil, they probably wouldn't be so in on Chris Bryant or Nick Castellanos and have to probably overpay for one of them and front load that contract with, $25-30 million a year. Instead, they have someone for $3.5 million a year this next year. So this coming season. So that's pretty much the episode. I know you can't go back, but Seidler is definitely going to be feeling it in his pockets if they do end up getting a Bryant or Castellanos, which, full transparency, I would be excited for. Obviously, those are better overall players than Franmil, but in terms of money saving, being able to spend in other areas, it would just be a whole lot easier if Franmil was on the team. So episode 92, we should have another interview coming up this week. Thank you so much for listening on podcast versions, watching on YouTube. And if you have any topics, any questions you want me to talk about on here during this lockout, just let me know and we'll get to them. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, let's go Padres.